and Dr. Collence, we recognize your presence. To all our attendees online, students and faculty alike, thank you for joining us. And we're hoping that today we're going to engage, we're going to pose more questions and also explore, because as you know, knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. But in this instance, we are fortunate because multiplication in this context does not require a calculator. Your presence today greatly honors this event, and without further delay, let us officially commence by inviting Professor Shemang to give us the welcome remarks. Prof. Elisha Shemang.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure for us to welcome you to Views. And my job is very simple, just to give you the welcome remarks to this wonderful and beautiful webinar. That is a forum for us to share how we progress with knowledge. So it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to Views, celebration of the International Open Access Week 2025, a global initiative that underscores the value of free, immediate, and online access to scholarly research. This year's frame, as you have themed it, is who owns our knowledge? It's a very important question, and it invites us to reflect deeply on the evolving dynamics of intellectual property, equitable access and stewardship of knowledge in a digital age. At Views, we are proud to be part of the global conversation, and therefore, we are committed to open access. It is not only philosophical, it is practical and institutional in views. In advancing our institutional commitment to open access, the Views Library, led by the director, has taken a strategic step to ensure that our research is not only produced, but also seen, shared, and valued globally. Through the development of the institutional repository, we provide digital platforms that showcase the university's scholarly output, enhancing visibility, accessibility, and impact. This is Views' commitment to democratizing knowledge and empowering our academic community to contribute meaningfully to global scholarship. The team of dedicated librarians embedded across various schools actively supports our researchers in publishing with credible open access journals. They offer guidance on journal selection, submission processes, and publishing ethics. We also recognize that financial barriers can hinder open access publishing. To address this, the Views Library benefits from Electronic Information for Libraries, a non-profit organization that supports access to knowledge through libraries in developing and transition economies. This has reduced our publishing costs. The library has also entered into a transformative agreement with Taylor and Francis, providing further opportunities for our researchers to publish openly and affordably, aligning with global best practices in scholarly communication. Today's panel discussion brings together a distinguished experts from across the world, from Germany, South Africa, Botswana, and United Kingdom, whose insights will help us unpack the complexity of knowledge, ownership, and explore pathways towards more inclusive, transparent research ecosystem. This year's webinar builds on a strong tradition. The Views Library has consistently hosted International Open Access Week events annually, with each year aligning to the global theme to spark dialogue and action among all of us. It started with exploring the structural equity, which was held in 2021, then discussions on linking open access to climate research in 2022, and the list goes on. Each event has deepened our collective understanding of open access and its transformative potential. Therefore, the theme of 2025, who owns our knowledge, is very important. It continues this legacy, reinforcing BU's role as a regional leader in open access scholarship and inclusive knowledge dissemination. Therefore, as you gather colleagues and panelists, let us use this platform to learn more and to affirm our championing equity in knowledge sharing and to empower our academic community to lead with purpose and integrity. Therefore, the workshop could not have come at a better time than now. So I wish you very stimulating discussions and a very enriching engagement. Please, let's participate freely and make sure that by the time we leave this place, we have answered a number of questions. Thank you very much and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Prof. Elisa Shaman for setting the stage for this panel discussion. And we now turn to the core of today's event, that is the panel discussion. And I will invite our distinguished panelists to get ready for the panel discussion. And guiding this panel discussion is the dynamic Dr. Ayanda Lebele, who is the Director of Library Services here in BUST. Dr. Lebele, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tlhomile. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. Colleagues, greetings from wherever you are. Greetings from wherever we are, colleagues, and let me go straight away into the webinar, which is what we are here for. And welcome to our open access webinar hosted by BUST. As introduced, I am Ayanda Lebele. I am the Director, Library Services at BUST, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. This year's global theme, Who Owns Our Knowledge, invites us to reflect on how knowledge is created, accessed, and shared. It's a question that resonates deeply here in Botswana, where institutions of higher learning are expanding research. Wait, let me ask, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Doc.
Okay, thank you. It's a question that resonates deeply here in Botswana, where institutions of higher learning are expanding research capacity and working to ensure that our contributions to global scholarship is visible, valued, and very freely accessible. Open access is also aligned with Botswana's national vision of economic diversification through a knowledge-based economy, where innovation, research, and inclusive access to information, just as the professor had mentioned in his opening remarks. Today's panel features international speakers, as he has indicated, and the organizers strategically opened up. They invited people from globally so that we as BUST have more opportunity of listening so that we can continue the conversation going forward. A chance to build stronger collaborations, co-authorships, and share platforms where our scholars can contribute and lead. And the key themes that we will be talking to in this particular webinar is access and equity, ownership and control, responsibility and ethics, inclusion, and the global knowledge divide. So once again, thank you for joining. I encourage you to engage actively. And can I now say, can we then start straight away? At this point, let me start with a special, let me start the webinar by introducing my panelists. And then after introducing my panelists, very briefly, I'll give them the platform to speak to the area that they want us to focus on. And then I would continue with questions. I would give them questions, and some may want to demonstrate through slides or a presentation or whatever graphic they would wish to emphasize their point. And then I would give you as the audience an opportunity to ask questions. But in the introductions, I want to start specifically with what I call her as the chief librarian, Zandi Mugiba. Zandi Mugiba is a global librarian, and I especially recognize the fact that when one of us was not able to step in due to health reasons and other challenges, when we called her and said, Zandi, we have a situation, she was like, no, when it's open access, I have to be there. And within 30 minutes, she was ready to come on board. Thank you so much, Zandi Mugiba. She's a global librarian, and she has been all over. At some stage, she was a Commonwealth Fellow in London, attached at the Middlesex University. She has a distinguished career spanning of 38 years in librarianship, including 22 years at the University of Fort Hare, where she also served as a part-time lecturer in the Department of Libraries. And for the past 16 years, she's been serving at UNISA as a librarian there. And she has managed print and electronic resources. She has managed print and electronic resources. And so when we talk of open access and the impact it has on libraries, we felt she is our rep actually in the region. Currently, she is serving as the Acting Deputy Director, Library Technology Services at UNISA. You are welcome, Zandi. Sorry, Director of Ceremony, Director of the event, we didn't get the chance to let you know that we have a new baby on the block by Zandi Mugiba. And then my next panelist is Dr. Tony Leliot. Tony, I hope I got the surname right. So let's play safe. Let me just say Dr. Tony. He is an associate professor. He is the Teacher Education and Development Lead at SAID, an NGO based in Johannesburg, South Africa. He co-leads Open Education Resources Africa Initiative. And you will get more about him. He was previously at the University of Witwatersrand. He has supervised more than 25 masters and doctorate students. So he is a seasoned researcher. He's not just an advocate of open educational resources. He is also a seasoned researcher. My other panelist is Judith Fetela. Judith is a senior research associate at the Lancaster University and a research fellow at Coventry. She is currently a research lead for the Open Book Collective, and she is it is a UK-based charity with an international membership that connects libraries, publishers, publishing services, researchers to provide new collective funding models for a sustainable and equitable open access, ebooks particularly. She's also a scholar in media and culture studies. Then we have our very own also, Dr. Audrey Masizana. She holds multiple awards, and for her in particular, I would want us to recognize her as a champion in the open access movement in Botswana. Dr. Audrey Masizana is a senior scholar and head of department at the computer science at the University of Botswana. She holds a PhD, of course, and her teaching and research interest in scientific application and data infrastructure for intelligent decision-making, including data mining and data warehouse technologies. Like I said, I wish we really recognize her more as a champion at a national level. She's a member of the executive committee of the Core Data, and she she has served her 2 terms as the chair at the CODATA. She has advocated and is passionate about adoption of open data, open science policies, and supporting infrastructure in Botswana in particular and globally. Currently, she is the chair of the development of the Botswana Open Data Policy. Dr. Masizana, we really want this policy up as fast as yesterday, so we will hear more from you. She's a well-seasoned researcher with over 40 publications, and currently in the year 2025, she's been a lead investigator and coordinator of the new research projects on behalf of her university and nationally. We also have Prof. Collence Chisita, Prof. Chisita joined. He would not be able to probably show his screen because he joined in under serious African context. We will talk about it when he does his presentation, where things just crashed before we take him off. We welcome you and we recognize you being there, Prof. Chisita. And I can see you've registered, you have entered here with a very different name, which really shows your Africa was happening. Thank you for joining us. He is one of our librarians and a lecturer librarian. He is very well spoken in the field of especially indigenous knowledge. He has managed to join us. Colleagues, at this point, let me just go straight into allowing my speakers to briefly introduce themselves. May I start with you, Dr. Masizana? Briefly for 2-3 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much, Doc. You have done a very good introduction already. I'm very happy that you invited us today on a subject that we find very interesting, very integral in our day-to-day lives in terms of publishing and providing, reflecting on what needs to be provided for us to have this open access throughout. But thank you very much. I am with the University of Botswana, former head of department, not current, but thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masizana. Could I invite you, Dr. Judith Fatala?
Yes, hello.
Introduce Dr. Judith Fatala.
Yeah.
How did I miss you, my friend? Sorry.
No problem. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm the research lead for a UK charity which we developed over the past few years and launched in 2022, which is called the Open Book Collective. And what we're doing is building what we hope is a better and a fairer and a more sustainable model for open access books with publisher and library members all over the world. We do, for example, have a publisher member located in Africa, which is African Minds, specifically for research of interest and important to the continent and research by African scholars. And we're looking at building ways of sustaining an open access book landscape that doesn't rely on problematic things like book processing charges, which are very inequitable, and connecting people and organizations who are interested in alternatives for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Could I ask you to briefly introduce yourself, Dr. Tony Elliott?
Yes, Dr. Tony Lelliot with an L.
Lelliot.
Unusual name. Yes, you've introduced me. I don't really need any more. I work at Sadie and I'm as co-lead for OER Africa. I'm not a librarian. I'm a former academic and open education resources and open access are close to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sizani, could you kindly introduce yourself and the points that you want us to focus on?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Hope we're all good. The 11th hour has rung and I had to respond. So you'll excuse me here and there, but I'm here. And I think I'm really interested in talking into, I think, two things: protecting indigenous knowledge systems in the age of open access and AI, and also the frameworks for ethical sharing and
Hi, hello.
protection
Is everybody
of
on?
open access
Oh, okay.
in library technology services. Hello,
Yes, we have lost you a bit.
shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me now? Yes, I'm working at UNISA as the head of library technology services. And I think I'm more interested in hearing what the colleagues will be sharing during this time. And I think it is just about time that we sit around the table and really look at how we're going to look at this critical issue, especially because, you know, AI and open access, things are really rapidly moving because the digital world is here and we need to embrace it, but also looking at key things that we need to do to ensure that we do it right. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chisita, are you able to speak where you are? Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead. This is how I'm going to run it now. I'm going to be asking my panelists to share thoughts on the questions that I would throw to them. Let me start with you, Dr. Masuzan. Did I warn you I would start with you? I don't think I did. Let's talk about issues of access and equity. Who accesses the knowledge and who is left behind? Let's talk about what would be hindering access and how do we get there? Oh, that's fast.
Thank you very much. Let me just use the, let me just try to look at all the questions that you threw to me. Am I audible? Am I okay?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think the way I would approach it is reminding ourselves that it's about open science, really. At the end of the day, we really are trying to move towards understanding and improving our environment in terms of open science. And you know what open science is about? It's about sharing our methods. It's about having our publications and methodologies and experiments being able to be accessed by all through publications or otherwise. We also have to talk about open access, which is a topic for today. Now that we have them, can we access them? And that's a different level altogether. We also have to talk about being able to talk to each other openly about our work, which is open review, without any problems, where equity comes into play. We also have to talk about collaborating at the same level, being able to do that in our scientific field. If we are talking about open science, then we have to be thinking about the platforms that are there that have to enable all this that we are talking about. I think I'm talking to people who already know what those platforms are. The most important is openness, shareability, And those are examples, for instance, in our environments where we are teaching. An example is given by MIT that is published openly their courseware so that everybody can use it. We also have institutional repositories that are supposed to provide open access publications to us, and so on. And of course, the expected outcome is that to promote transparency, data, decisions that are data driven, breaking silos, participating at the same level, citizen empowerment, and of course, scientific process. So we are in all that we are trying to do by talking about open access also. We are really trying to promote open science. So the questions were whose knowledge is represented and who do you think gets the access to knowledge and who's left behind? It's a very simple question because it has become gradually very clear, really, that the global south is marginalized and excluded due to a number of reasons that I've listed there. And that most, when you're talking about publications and knowledge, we see it more in the global north. And the reasons could be, of course, research funding in our areas are still not moving as we should be. We are still looking for outward, looking to the north for funding. The language is very important, and there's this language called English, which everybody uses and is dominating. Where there's no English, we also see some limitations. We also see journals that are more on publishers who are coming from the north. And we see research metrics that determine our PMS also not favoring the global south. So really, I think, and some of the commons that are created in order to publish really do not favor the global south. So these are some of the reasons that are made to believe that really the global north is the one that is being hosted knowledge more than everyone. So the question was, what systematic barriers contribute to this exclusion? I tried to approach it from the looking at the FAIR principle as we are advised by UNESCO on open science, and other international bodies. We are also trying to look at the FAIR principle throughout. If you look at our environment, if we start with findability, the F part of the FAIR, we have to start by what are the barriers that are making us not find these publications. So those are some of the things that are put there. Institutional limitations in themselves are not making provisions for accessibility, therefore for findability rather. And so forth. Limited access to public repositories, language, terminology barriers, and also multidisciplinary exchange where there's no policies that help improve multidisciplinary exchange. And also when you look at the A part of the accessibility, of the FAIR principle, which is accessibility, and as I've put there, that is a factor of many things: access control, policy, mediation. So even though the material or the publications or the methodologies or the experiments or the data sets are available, are actually there. It's the next thing is how do we allow it to be accessed? And so there are various types of access: open to zero, safeguarding, which is limited risk, and closed completely. So access is about conditions under which data can be accessed. And we see that because there are policy limitations in areas, we are seeing APCs also being a barrier, digital literacy also being a barrier, technological gaps, infrastructure, and also our own cultural and socio-economic factors preventing accessibility. And again, in terms of interoperability, there has to be, for us to communicate as a community, we need to understand each other. The semantics, the way we we understand things and the terminology that we use, and also the interdisciplinary communication and just the practices themselves, openness to data sharing practices. And on the technical side, of course, interoperability in our limited, low resource constrained environments, we find that it's preventing interoperability. And then when it comes to reusability, similar reasons again: technical barriers, ethical, legal, inconsistent documenting platforms such as the repositories, the disciplinary differences, and so forth. So this FAIR principle it's only as good as said, but in our environments we see that there are barriers that are really not making it fair as it should be in the global south. So the other question that I was given, and I'm about to conclude, Doc, is that how can open access platform better represent knowledge from the global south? So how can we now look at ourselves and improve the environments, and also talk about democratizing our data and information sharing? So we need platforms that value diversity. That's the first thing. In terms of language, in terms of epistemologies and formats, we also need platforms that understand our context. It's very, very important. And knowledge should not be viewed as a shared resource. It should be viewed as a shared resource, not a private commodity that has to be sold. I think we need to try and get to that level where we work our practices in such a way that knowledge is actually seen as a shareable community, not a private community. And use the FAIR principles that are shared that are as a guide, and then implementation should be by context. In our areas should be by context. We should not make an assumption that the FAIR principles are fair all over. So we have to look at policy integration, some legal frameworks that should be put in place to govern the ownership of data and how to access. It should start at institutions and work its way up to national level. And we'll also be empowering local research and innovation, coming up with local and regional open access platform, which can showcase our local research, and also making sure that multilingual publication is also included in this arena. It being the fact that we tend to be always responding to the global north calls and platforms, and also we are succumbing to the practices that are infringed upon us. Other ways, there was a question also at what can open access help bridge the gap between the local and knowledge systems. I'm glad that my doctor is going to talk more on indigenous knowledge. I think that is where we ought to go, only after also recognizing that these financial barriers to knowledge are a problem. That is the biggest problem we have right now. But the next best thing to do is to look at our local research and knowledge, and see how we can create repositories that are of ours, our repositories. Start from your institution, go to the country level, regional level, and also preserving indigenous and community knowledge. Encouraging collaboration, knowledge exchange between North and South. There has to be some level of equity that I give you, you give me back, sort of thing, and not us always having to be succumbing to platforms that are put upon us. So we have to contribute equally. And also funding mechanisms, they need to adapt. We need to encourage adaptation of funding mechanisms. Thank you very much.
Wrap it up, Doc?
I was just finishing that. Those are the questions that really were, that really summarizes what was given to me to respond to. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you so much. You said it so well and set the scene. Actually, I'm now leading to you, Zandi, because she landed on talking about the indigenous knowledge in particular. She says we in the South are more disadvantaged. Could you speak to that? In the open age, in the open access and the AI age, how can we protect the indigenous knowledge? And how can we protect it from exploitation and misappropriation, while still protecting and promoting sharing? Could you speak to that?
Yes, please, colleagues. In actual fact, when I got the questions, I started thinking that perhaps we might need to look at having the frameworks that will be guiding us on how we would ensure that there's ethical sharing and protection of indigenous knowledge during this period of open access and AI. And therefore, I looked at about 3 or 4 points, could easily be 7. But I wanted us to look at the community governance and consent, that we need to always remember that indigenous communities have the sovereign right to govern their knowledge. And each time we want to do anything, we need to have that at the back of our minds, and therefore establish prior informed consent protocols before sharing or using this indigenous knowledge. And also perhaps create community advisory boards that oversee that all knowledge sharing initiatives are given or awarded as such. So the first point is that there should be community governance and consent, that we need to bring our communities on board. After all, this is their knowledge. And also the issues of access control, so that we ensure that we establish public restricted and confidential knowledge, and kind of like be able to look at the levels of even how we share this knowledge and how we ensure that this knowledge gets to be accessed. And suitable technologies, and for instance, the tools like the digital rights, and to enforce access restrictions when necessary, and also recognize culturally sensitive and sacred knowledge as non-shareable or restricted. But we should find a way of ensuring that there is, of course, access to knowledge and information, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that where we need to enforce access restrictions, we do that. And then, of course, attributions and intellectual integrity. It's one of the things that I looked into, that we need to always provide proper attributions to the knowledge holders. And I think we also realize what happens to the artists, to the writers, to the poets, when after having worked towards, giving us that will sweep our minds away from being frustrations by poetry or by music, but they end up not actually generating anything that they will put on the table. It's like we forget who are the holders and the generators of that knowledge. And of course, maintaining contextual metadata that explains the origin of the work that we were using, and of course, the restrictions into that kind of knowledge. And then I also thought we should also be able in the framework to have what we call benefits, the mechanism to ensure that whoever has come up with any piece of work indigenously, we should have a mechanism that will ensure that there is a way to ensure that if there's any profit or if there's any benefit that needs to go to the originators of the work, it does that. And also if there are any monetary benefits, there should be educational and technological and capacity building ways of ensuring that those mechanisms are in place. And also to ensure transparency in terms of accounting and reporting on benefits distribution, so that people are kind of like aware. In actual fact, if lack of a better word, they need to know that where benefits are due, they should actually be the key receivers of such benefits. And of course, the legal and ethical protection of this individual knowledge. during this time. Yes, it is open, but anything that is open, there should also be a level of control that we should support recognition of a collective intellectual property rights, laws and policies, and no individual can do that as a silo. We need to collaborate as we look at those ethical and legal guidelines and develop the ethical guidelines that will go beyond, the conventional IP frameworks, and also advocate for international and cooperation to respect individual knowledge protections. And one of the key things that I also thought we could look into is education and capacity building, that we need to train our developers, our researchers, and institutions on cultural sensitivity and indigenous rights, and also promote co-creation and collaboration rather than, being kind of like discrete, but we need to be up there and be able to support when necessary. And also these indigenous communities in developing digital literacy and infrastructures. For instance, we cannot have a community that comes up with a very good documentary, but there's nothing that they're gaining from that, when it could have easily been perhaps their culture of how they did things and how they are moving with the paradigm in ensuring that the culture is upheld, but also it needs to be able to diversify or to move with the paradigm. And of course, the ethical use of AI development. To embed indigenous knowledge ethics into AI development and deployment, and also collaborate with indigenous experts throughout AI lifecycle stages. That's what I had, colleagues. Thank you.
I'm glad you land on issues of protecting the rights, which then drives me straight to you, Dr. Fatala. But before I go to you, let me warn Chisita that definitely when we talk of the rise of the indigenous people in knowledge generation and making reference to how sharing content in a way that respects their rights but also promotes research, it's definitely on your table. So when Dr. Fatala lands, I will then come to you, Prof. Chisita. Dr. Fatala,
Thank you.
who truly owns or who owns the knowledge or holds the real power once it's created? Is it the author, the publisher, or the society, or the community they were getting the knowledge from? And how does this ownership thing affect the dissemination and the reuse and the resharing of that knowledge? So I'm driving you to the intellectual property now. Thank you.
I suppose in a way, there's sort of two areas that question touches on. And one is sort of more philosophical, the question of knowledge ownership. One is more philosophical and one is more legal and socially situated. And I suppose, broadly speaking, philosophically, the first question it raises is knowledge the kind of thing that can be owned? And if you sort of look at, for example, the history of the invention of copyright, which was in the UK in the beginning, in around 1710, the idea that knowledge was a kind of ownable thing was not taken for granted or natural at all, and it sort of developed as what was considered a useful legal fiction for what people believed would be the promotion of learning. And at a fundamental level, I don't know if I believe that knowledge is the kind of thing that can be owned. But then, on a more kind of literal and practical and legal sense, and also as we've already talked for a minute about indigenous knowledge production, we're in a global situation where many people have been subject to process of extractivism and neo-colonial approaches to knowledge production, where their labor is being exploited and extracted. So we're still in the situation that we're in. And as it stands now, unfortunately, most of the knowledge, or at least a huge proportion of the knowledge that scholars produce, and that they produce within their situated communities and from situated communities, is legally owned by about 5 mega corporations, who are also engaged in processes of data extractivism, data mining, and surveillance capitalism. And that is because the vast majority of scholars are working in a situation where, for the sake of being published and for the sake of careers and for the sake of seeking broad dissemination, feel that we have to sign over our work to Elsevier or Taylor and Francis or Wiley or whatever. And also, I mean, a lot of scholars are not particularly well informed about the contracting process around publication. I didn't used to be. When I first started publishing, I barely read my contracts. I just was happy that a journal took my article. So I was like, yeah, sure, yeah, publish my thing, without even thinking about the fact that I was signing over quite a lot of rights and signing over quite a lot of abilities to reuse and reproduce it and disseminate my context. And that's still the position that, you know, the majority of scholars are operating in. And when scholars are in a disadvantaged position, if they're precariously employed, if they're working in a less well-funded institution, the pressure to do that can feel more intense. You know, that, you know, I've got to get my paper out there. I need it to be read by as many people as possible. I need it to be read in America. I need it to be read, you know, in Europe and in the UK. And the way that that affects dissemination and control, then, it can feel like, oh, okay, well, if I go with this big publisher and this big name, that will be great because my paper will be in Scopus, it'll be well indexed, everybody will get it in their libraries. But when it comes to licensing, these things can often be a lot more restrictive than we realize. I think a lot of us have probably had the frustration of opening a book chapter or trying to download a paper and realizing that we can't highlight it or we can't save notes or we can't save our highlights. And that's because it's published on proprietary software and it's published by a platform that is owned by these massive corporate publishers. So we can't, and so scholars cannot use the text fully. They might be able to read it if their internet connection is stable, and if their internet connection is not stable, they might lose whatever they've read because they can only read it while they're online on that platform. So that's sort of a major way that ownership, what legal ownership, can affect dissemination and reuse. And that's why when we have people, publishers, make applications to join the Open Book Collective, one of the things that we look at in our membership standards is not just, is it open access? We look at open licenses. Like, how are people able to use this text? Can we download it in multiple formats? Can we get a PDF? Can we get a format that'll work on a Kindle? Can we get a copy that we can read on my phone? Can we annotate it? Can we share it? Can we reuse it? So licensing is very important. And I think this is, again, something that a lot of scholars don't really think about or are not particularly educated on in our eagerness to get our work out there and our eagerness to be cited. And it can be very frustrating to a researcher and it can be like, well, I'm going to go and read something else then. There's a lot of papers published. The idea, I mean, the question of how to license a work, there's no set answer to that. It's very contextual, and there are sort of questions, as we touched on earlier, around things like community ownership and guardianship of Indigenous knowledge, and for example, whether we would want our work to be available for commercial exploitation or not. So it's not as though, you know, I'm going to sit here and say, well, this is the license you can use and you should use. It's very contextual. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But I guess that then leads me into the third part of the questions that were put to me, which was, how are the intellectual property laws and publishing models evolving to shape the ownership of knowledge, especially to support open access? Well, I think that we're sort of at a crossroads at the moment because on the one hand, more and more funders are mandating open access. More and more people are publishing open access, and the ways that this is going to be pursued could go very well or it could go very badly. I always think about if you know Reggie Raju at University of Cape Town published a paper where he said that the way that open access is going is a betrayal of the global South because it's depending on fees to publish articles open access and fees to publish books open access. So instead of being shut out of readership, now Global South scholars and other marginalized scholars are just going to be shut out of publishing instead. And book processing charges can be astronomically high. I think the single highest book processing charge I've seen is £15,000, but 11 or 12,000 pounds is not unusual. So in terms of alternative models, this is where I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, if I can figure out how more. I'm not too sure how to. Oh, there we go. Share screens. So I just want to take you for a second to the homepage of the Open Book Collective. So as I mentioned before, what we are, can everybody see that, by the way?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
Well, what we are is an incorporated charity that is trying to find a better way of doing this. So what we do is libraries join us as members and they support small, diverse, sustainable, scholar-led publishers to publish open access books without charging book processing charges. So it's free to the author, it's free to the reader. And we also, as I say, we have standards around open licensing, we have standards around production values, we have standards around review. Our membership standards are very stringent because this is something people worry about, is quality when it comes to open access publishing. And I'll show you just a few of our publishers that we have here that we support. They're not all so I'll show you actually our member African Minds, as it's the most relevant in this context, which is an OA publisher based in Cape Town, South Africa, does a lot of social science, publishes mostly African academics as thinkers, but also kind of international scholars with an interest and a close affinity with the continent. And you can see down there some of their most recent publications. So all of these books, they are going to be free to read. They're going to be available in multiple formats. They're going to be high quality productions. And we have many scholars, and we also have things like metadata providers, database providers that sort of provide the scaffolding or the infrastructure for these services to work. So I'll stop sharing my screen there, but do feel free to explore that later on. I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen. Hang on a second.
Go to share and then you.
Oh. Have I? Oh.
No, you're still sharing.
I'm still sharing. Okay. Application windows.
Go to share and then stop sharing.
I'm not seeing an option for stop sharing. So if I click share here.
Okay, I'll stop it for you from this side.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could stop it for me, that would be great. So yeah, that was all the questions that I was asked to contribute on.
Okay, you can close your screen, I guess.
Thank you.
Before I go to you on open educational resources, let me give Prof. Shisita a point, a starting point there. We are now here talking licenses, and she says it could be very bad, it could be very good, it could work for us, and it links to what Prof. Masizana said, and Dr. Masizana said earlier on, that our measurements of performance in the academic sector, it counts the number of publications, but it does not look at issues like who, beyond just the number of items that I've published or articles that I've published, who else benefits? And what are other benefits that I could get other than just having numbers being counted that I've published X number of items? Am I now being closed out of my own works? And you also talk about what happens to your rights. My brother Chisita, can you throw in there, especially relating what she just said to the rights of our people, your people that you love the most?
Oh, hello. How are you?
Thank you.
Oh, how are you?
We are good. We are good. We are just all ears. Go
All right,
ahead.
yeah. In fact, what I will touch on is epistemic sovereignty within the infosphere and how to resolve open access or reconcile open access with indigenous knowledge protection in the era of artificial intelligence. Well, I look at this from the perspective of the global south, meaning the geographical space and also the metaphorical identity that represents the unseen, the unheard, disowned, and disavowed, delegitimized, invisibilized, demonized, among many others. So we are looking at indigenous people as the people of the global south. Openness in scholarship is constituted of a variety of things. For example, we look at the constitutional right to access public records. We're also looking at the, transition from secrecy to transparency with regards to freedom to access research data and processes and outcomes of research endeavors. And transition also into an era where sharing becomes part of the economy, an economy based on sharing. And why open scholarship? We have to understand also the various principles and concepts. For example, the liberal democratic philosophy that knowledge should be accessible to the public for the benefit of the public resonates well with also other initiatives undertaken under the umbrella of open access and also the initiatives through the United Nations for making digital global goods, public goods accessible to everyone. And this also resonates with a radical philosophical view for free accessibility to all knowledge. And this takes us back also to other developments that have happened within the open access movement. For example, during the evolutionary process of open access, we had like Arnold Schwartz coming up with the Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto. We had also Blankenfield coming up with the Hackers Manifesto. And when we analyze these documents, they give us a better understanding of the idea behind open access with regards to removing barriers to access information, and also the call to remove paywalls and ensuring that knowledge is accessible to all, irrespective of where you are, whether in the global north or the global south. So paywalls are seen as an immoral act, and which runs contrary to the notion of democratic access to information. And this movement is, we are experiencing it now within the global south, is some challenges. For example, the inadequate digital infrastructure, the lack of awareness regarding the benefits of open scholarship. For example, when we tried to introduce open access initially, it was misunderstood as some form of process to dispossess those who are already dispossessed. It took us quite a lot of effort to unpack the benefits that arise from open scholarship. We also have got issues of language and power, lack of institutional support, lack of funding for research, and underrepresentation of knowledge from the global south. And also the fact that the high impact journals are not owned by people from the global south, but by multinational publishers from the global north. So that creates a problem in the sense that there is a vacuum in terms of indigenous publishing industries that promote indigenous knowledge. So paywalls become a barrier because they undermine access to research, irrespective of the fact that research is funded by public funding. And we view them as barriers in the sense that when compared to open access articles, paywalled articles are said to receive fewer page views and citations and attention, unlike the open access content. Now, we also have to understand open access in the context of the coloniality of knowledge, whereby open access at times has been viewed as a tool for facilitating and accelerating the access of scientists from the global south to the global north. It has also been viewed as some form of epistemic alienation of these scientists and extraversion of science that Judith talked about. And the issue of language and the dominance of language, English is the language that receives more attention and more support. And we also have issues to do with the data colonialism. And this raises issues also to do with what we can call data, indigenous data, information and knowledge sovereignty in the age of AI. Now, what do we mean by this issue is that we have seen the sudden growth of information in the digital era, and handling this information in line with the law.
Prof, could you hold it at that one when you are talking of what do we do? Because now you are getting on to who should take what responsibility. Could you pause it at that one? Let me get to the next stage. I'll get back to you.
So can I continue?
No, I was asking you to pause it at that one before you go into talking about responsibilities.
Oh, okay.
What should we do, or who should be doing what? Please, let's hold it there, and then we will get back to it. Let's hear what now, because you do bring points that have been brought up by the different speakers. it is very obvious everybody is lamenting the global south disadvantages. And then it's also, you are buttressing the point that even scholars, researchers, they are disadvantaged. And you bring the point that there is a lack of awareness that we are. I like when you say that there is immorality in knowledge sharing. Can you leave it at that? Now let's talk to the one in the educational field, in the field. Dr. Tony Elliott, what responsibilities do educators and technologists have when creating and when sharing the knowledge? Particularly if you could link it to where he just landed, the indigenous knowledge and AI.
Sure. Can you see this? And can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I won't hopefully take, okay, so these are the questions that you asked me. Thanks very much. And it's around responsibilities that when people are creating and sharing knowledge, both through OER and AI. And then you also asked what risks or biases might arise. And finally, you asked how OER can ensure equitable representation and access. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about have been touched on by my colleagues. I'm just going to keep it brief. First one is very important, accuracy and academic integrity. Both of those very important. So I've got the three areas, responsibilities are the first 2 or 3 slides. Quality assurance is key. Ever since OER started up, people have always been asking about quality. It has got a lot better. So we've got to make sure we have as high quality as possible. All of us need training in AI because it's constantly changing. And obviously AI isn't any one thing. There's generative AI and there are other sorts of AI as well. So we do all need training in that. So that's an area to ensure both integrity and also accuracy. What about inclusivity and equity? We've heard something about this from my fellow speakers. We've got to have diverse voices, extremely important. I'm reflecting what other people have said. Marginalized knowledge does have to be represented properly. So that's another area of responsibility of ours. And of course, we have to design things inclusively. Okay, in order for all this to get done, there's a responsibility for professional development. And we have professional development frameworks specifically for African librarians. And some people in this webinar today will know something about them. If I just quickly go to that page. And here we have the academic research librarians frameworks. So people are welcome to go and look at those frameworks for academic and research librarians. So that is capacity. The final responsibility I'm going to talk about is getting students as co-creators and adapters of OER. Very important to get students involved, and an excellent initiative that has been working on that is the Dot4D initiative at University of Cape Town. So I'm just hoping it's going to come up. There we are, Dot4D in their Center for Higher Education Development. So very important, digital open textbooks for development. And they used a lot of students as co-creators in those textbooks. What about risks? You ask also about risks and biases. Okay, we've heard AI, we do know, reflects the biases embedded in their training data. Very important. and that tends to lead to the underrepresentation or misrepresentation of marginalized groups, and it tends to reinforce stereotypes. So that's an area, a risk bias area we have to be alert to. Another risk or bias is the idea of what goes on in AI. When AI makes a decision about something, it's all a black box. We don't really, we don't know. That's where we need the AI fluency to understand a bit more about what's happening, but it often operates as a black box. We don't understand how decisions are made, and this opaque nature can affect students from underrepresented backgrounds. The third risk and bias is quite a lot are being trained on openly licensed content without consent, and this can undermine the spirit of openness. So it's an area that's ongoing. We don't really know what the future is going to be here, but there is certainly a certain amount of exploitation of open content. Okay, finally, how can OER help? Educators, librarians can adapt the content. We've got to reflect local contexts and languages and cultural values. All of those are important. The policies that your institution creates around this has to advocate for a human in the loop. We can't leave everything up to AI. Would be a big, big problem without humans having some intervention there. And finally, we can encourage our learners, our students, to become co-creators of knowledge, and that gives them agency and gives them critical engagement with the content. So those are the areas in which OER can help, and I think that's what I've got to say.
Thank you so much. It's all getting to issues of the disadvantaged, whether we talk educational resources and what needs to be done. And now I'm getting back to you, my brother Collins, and I would be throwing the same question to everybody, but I would love you to start from there. Leliot talked of us having, though he was referring to AI, he mentions us having policies that have human in the loop, particularly the disadvantage, because here conversation has been the disadvantage. And almost everybody has talked about the language. And language here, I'm not just talking to the spoken language, even the metadata. It's also one of the restrictive things. There's policy, there's metadata, there's the language that we speak. But how do we, who should do what? That's where I post you. Who do you think should be working on what? So that we have, or we address what you earlier on said is the immoral, undemocratic, having knowledge and not sharing knowledge. Reminds me of one lecturer who used to say, knowledge is a resource, and like all other resources, it has to be mined. And this open access or open cast mining, it's controlled. We don't just go there and say, there's a pit, so let's get the diamond. Can you pick it up from there? Following you, then I will get Judith to follow up the same question, who needs to do what? And then I will then give Zandi, then Dr. Masizana, in that order. Thank you. Who needs to do what? Very briefly.
All right. Okay. What I can say there is that I will focus more on the people who are operating within the infosphere, the sphere that is composed of analog and digital networks of information. We also need to think about indigenous literacy in order to empower the indigenous people so that they do not become victims of researchers and pillagers of data. So we have so many literacies currently, and not much emphasis has been placed on indigenous literacy. So indigenous literacy can be applied to source evaluation, whether oral sources or what, it also methodologies. And in most cases, emphasis is moving towards what we can call participatory action research, community-based participatory research, among other things. And we also need to embed it within data analysis and also how to extract data collection processes. And I think you find that most indigenous people, if you read through many texts, there is this issue of researched to death. People have, since 15th century, people have been coming to research on indigenous people. And how do we transform that research to death syndrome into a research to life? Or how do we transform research to death into researching ourselves to life and longevity by empowering the indigenous people with literacy skills where they become core participants, active participants within the research itself, rather than being sort of like objects of this research. Then we also have policymakers at various levels, institutional, local, and governmental level. How do we territorize knowledge artifacts that have been misappropriated from the global south to the global north? So this involves a lot of stakeholders in working out the mechanisms of how this can be achieved. So this is like a synergistic, it's a process that requires a synergistic approach between the locals, various stakeholders, and also the international community, which might take us to diplomacy and international relations in terms of re-territorialization and the return of stolen knowledge and artifacts. And also, how do we compensate for knowledge that has got collective ownership, which is the sui generis knowledge, that is the indigenous knowledge. If it's vulnerable to pillage by multinational companies, what mechanisms do we need to put in place to protect it? So indigenous literacy comes in as a key tool. Lastly, we also need to find ways on how we can upset what we can call asymmetries of power. That is, we find now experts still dominate research, but can we broaden the scope to include even indigenous people who are not really experts as per the definition of the credentialized society, homogenized and credentialized society, which we associate with the degrees, diplomas, and etc. And take into account the university of life, where people have graduated in society through experience passed on to them from one generation to another. So research projects should ensure community leadership and control and be locally grounded. Thanks.
Thanks, my friend, my brother. You are there stressing co-creation, synergies, and you are calling for policies and frameworks that will speak to that. Thank you very much. Judith, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, so the question of who needs to do what is an interesting one, because the Open Book Collective developed out of a project which was called the COPIN project, which stands for Community-Led Infrastructures for Open Access Monographs. Oh, Community-Led Publishing Infrastructures for Open Monographs. And one of the questions you were asking is when we say community, who is our community? Who are our communities? Who are we in community with? There is a lot of money in the global publishing, scholarly publishing system. And, you know, Wiley and Taylor and Francis are not going to start behaving ethically if we ask them nicely. They're not here to serve you and me. They're here to make as much money as they possibly can for their shareholders. So I don't perceive organizations as us, like ours, as being in community with them. It's something different. And I think that a lot of the change that needs to happen is going to come from librarians, or hopefully is going to come from the kind of librarians that think the way that we do. And because librarians are often the gatekeepers for funding. And instead of investing loads and loads of money in read and publish deals, which some universities are moving away from read and publish deals. There's, for example, like a big commitment in Sweden, and there's one in the Netherlands of people are starting to talk about we need to move away from these read and publish details because they're not equitable, they're not sustainable. And I think that ethically minded open access librarians are a big key to doing scholarly publishing differently. We spent a lot of time talking to them, interviewing librarians from different countries. We need their support because there is enough money in the system to do this right. It's just going to the wrong places. There is enough money that publishers don't need to depend on book processing charges and don't need to depend on article processing charges, but we need to reroute it so that authors and institutions are not penalized in this way. And we think the solution is collective models like this one, or at least a solution is collective models. That is one way that diamond models, where there's no fee to the author, there's no fee to the reader, can work. And, you know, we also need researchers to be on board with this because a lot of us, and I'm talking about past me as well, you know, before I was aware of this stuff, are invested in, well, I've got to go with this publisher. I've got to get my article into this journal. I don't really understand or care about the politics of how it gets published or who can access it. I just need to get that out there and I need to get cited because, you know, when you're at the start of your career and you perceive that as this is the only way I'm going to get anywhere, this is the only way I'm going to be able to survive as an academic. So funders and institutions need to start recognizing publications on their own merit, not on the name of what the publisher is or what the journal of the publisher is. And they say they will, but will they really?
I guess, Zandi, it goes straight to your desk. You earlier on talked about frameworks that govern. We need to have ways of bringing everybody on board. And I would want you to specifically zero in on the point where she landed, where she talks of publishers and researchers and us as librarians. How do we enable, particularly the disadvantaged? What do we need to do with the publishers or with the researchers? Whichever way you want to take it. Thank you.
Colleagues, good afternoon again. I think the first point would be there's nothing for the people without the people. Whoever could be affected by, say, for instance, a drought should be part of the discussions as to how do we alleviate whatever challenge that there is. So I think a call for respectful and collaborative approaches And when I'm talking about that, we might need to say we need to have focus groups or advocacy groups that will be looking at monitoring, accountability, and redress. By that, I mean we create mechanisms for monitoring use and misuse of this indigenous knowledge. We also establish clear accountability frameworks and consequences for violations, should there be any. And also provide access redress pathways for communities to address their own grievances so that we don't close anyone off for whatever. We're moving forward. We can't move forward and leave others behind. So I think the framework really for one, training, because when you train, you actually empower. So people must be trained to be empowered. And also we need to look at compliance and reporting. And how do we do that? What will actually raise the bar for us to check if people are still complying, and when do we report? After there have been reports, what do we do about the reports so that we can be able to nudge all these things right at the bat, but we need to collaborate. We cannot work as silos. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It goes to you, Dr. Masizana. She's making reference to advocacy and accountability. We should work towards that. Now, I want you to bring it home. You mentioned a lot of frameworks or platforms that even some of them I was like, okay. So when you talk on what needs to be done, if you could go back a bit into those platforms and let us know what needs to be done, particularly here in Botswana, because now we have had that global voice. Can we bring it home? Thank you. What needs to be done and by whom? Thank you.
I'm going to just reiterate what has already been said. Co-creation, collaboration, but I still think especially if you're talking about Botswana, a policy, we need to improve on policy. I know that we are developing open science policy at national level right now, and we are waiting for that guidance. I still think that's where we begin, because practices, people are trying their luck wherever they are, but we need a national guide. We need to be made to follow certain standards. For instance, we've been talking about indigenous knowledge. There's the care principles that were actually developed here in Botswana, the principles that are looking at how to deal with data for indigenous environments. But we also now have to uplift those platforms, as you said, or those principles as given to us, and make them contextual. And only policy can help us if we put it down, we document and say, institutions, all institutions, you must have this. Your repositories have to behave like this. Your communications, your PMSs have to be like that. So for me, it's about developing policies that support. And of course, with policies, you have to make consultations with the people who are involved, including the community itself, to come up with how you are going to proceed. So really, for me, it's policy, and also, as I said, emphasizing on co-creation platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's co-creation, collaboration, having frameworks, and she's coming down to say those, especially in Botswana, we need a national guide so that it guides the institutions. And the institutions are all making efforts. Ms. Amakalan and Ms. Winnie, do we have questions from the audience? Audience, you could indicate. I can give you 2 minutes if you have a quick burning one, but there are so many discussion points that I imagine that I think we need more conversation. We need another roundtable on this to talk more on these issues that emerged. But can anybody, any speaker, anybody from the audience with a critical question? Ms. Amu, do we have any questions from the, I can't see them from the.
Thank you, moderator.
Box?
Currently, we don't have any questions on the chat box.
Okay. My panelists, anybody with a very pressing one item that would take 1 second before I wrap up and give back to the to Dr. Dr.Collence as the director?
Oh, yes.
Yes, Prof.
Hello.
A second. Yes,
Yeah,
Prof. In a second.
Okay, yeah. In fact, we need also to think about this in the context of decoloniality is a strategy to dismantle the architectures of exclusion and epistemic extravist culture, which is its roots dating back to the 15th century and has continued on up to this stage of neocolonialism.
Oh, thanks, Prof. So in Setswana, you are saying, Setswana is my language, my native language. In Setswana, you are saying we must reverse the system that excluded others. Thank you so much. Rep Gitoko, can I say this was a very informing discussion? I wish we had the whole day, because every speaker is bringing up a point that is yet another, a call for yet another webinar. But what is emerging from here is there's a call for co-creation, collaboration. Librarians and researchers need to be working together towards creating an environment where there is a fair open access. I wish to thank you and hand over back to you. Thank you, my panelists. Over to you, Dr. Collence.
Thank you, Doc. You've been a good moderator, and I really enjoyed this panel discussion. We really learned a lot from these discussions. Like you have highlighted, I think we need another round so that we can talk more about these issues and dissect these issues, because these are interesting issues. Thank you so much. Thank you, our panelists, and for those insightful presentations. And I would like to say, remember, much like a well-engineered system, knowledge thrives when its components, ideas, perspectives, and dialogue work together seamlessly. And I think now we're coming to the last item on our program, that is the closing remarks. And as all good discussions must pause, it is now time to officially close today's panel discussion. Please join me in welcoming Professor Makubate, Acting Dean of the Postgraduate School, to deliver the closing remarks. Prof.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otomil. And good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, distinguished panelists. And good afternoon, participants. And yes, this was a thought-provoking session. And you'll agree with me that it has been a truly enlightening session. And please allow me to extend my sincere appreciation to our panelists who joined us from different parts of the world. We had panelists from the United Kingdom, panelists from South Africa, panelists from Germany, and here at home in Botswana. And let me also say to the panelists that your diverse perspectives, they have enriched our understanding of open access, and they have enriched our understanding of knowledge ownership, and they have also enriched our understanding of inclusivity in research dissemination. And as highlighted by our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Teaching and Learning, Professor Shaman, in his opening remarks, here in BOOST, open access is not just a BOOST initiative, it is institutional. And it represents here in BOOST our collective commitment to ensuring that knowledge that we generate is shared widely, responsibly, and equitably. And this thinking, this philosophy, it aligns perfectly well with Botswana's national strategy of promoting access to information, innovation, and sustainable development. And today's discussion on who owns our knowledge reminds us that research belongs not to individuals. Research do not belong to institutions alone, but to the global community. It seeks to serve the global community. It seeks to assist. And I believe, and I believe you also believe that true progress, it happens when knowledge is open. It happens when knowledge is inclusive. It happens when knowledge is used to empower others. And let me close by saying that on behalf of BOOST at large, I thank the organizing team, the BOOST Library, our moderator, Dr. Lebele, the program director, Buthomile, the panelists, and all participants who made this event a success. Let us continue to champion open access and ensure that our research contributes meaningfully to society. Thank you and have a pleasant afternoon. God bless you.
Thank you. Could we kindly show our faces and then we take a group picture?
Also wants the kids to be in English media.
Like my vice chancellor usually say, I want to see your beautiful faces. My boss Tabi is online. Yeah, Racha, madam. Now I'm hot. I have multiple bosses, so now the other boss just showed face when I said the boss is online. Director, I recognize your presence. We have amongst us the director of the National Library. He is the voice of libraries in Botswana. Ms. Amwe, you taking the picture? Now my other boss is up. Miss Amo, kindly take the picture quickly so that we may go before boss Bubana closes. Ma?
I'm on it.
Okay. Tell us to close before my quality assurance boss closes us because we are way beyond time. Are you done?
Not yet.
Hello, Tramilia, thank you. Can I hand back to you? I was just making that special request.
Yes.
We can leave.
Yes, maybe just the last word. I think I can just say that knowledge grows when it is shared, and even online, we can keep the doors of access open and the conversations alive. So I think, yeah, we can organize another panel discussion so they can have more discussions around these issues.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.